Hi, some time ago somebody contacted me and asked me if I'd show how to make stencils for sewing. Now, the basic principle of stencils, as far as I can see, is the same whether you make them for painting through or whether you're going to use them for sewing. But the channels that you make have to be a lot smaller if you're going to use them for your sewing or quilting designs, because you want to be able to either pound some chalk through them or to draw a very thin pen line with, say, a water erasable pen, something like that. So back in September I had a little bit of a play, and I posted on my blog here on the 24th of September something that I'd been playing with, and I asked if there was any people that sew or quilt out there that thought this would work, and several of you replied. So in today's video I'm going to go into ScanNCut Canvas and I'm going to show you how I started to put together the stencils, and here are a few designs. This one here is the one you've just seen on my blog, and then these are a couple of others. I've actually made some others, but I just thought I'd just show you the basic principles. Once you know how to do this, then you can apply this to any shape you want, so to flourishes, you know, to anything that you can auto trace, you can then bring into Canvas and turn it into a stencil and apply your break marks into it. So I'm just going to come and get a new blank page. I'm going to start off with a heart first. So I'm going to come into the basic shapes. As I say, I'm just going to use basic shapes for this, but you could auto trace something and then change it into a stencil. So I'm going to pick the plain heart, and this comes in at just under 4 inches. So for this I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to duplicate it and I'm going to make one smaller. Now all as I would say is you've got to make the pattern that you're going to use, you've got to make it the size it needs to be, because once you've made this into a stencil, if you then try to make it bigger or smaller, that will affect the diameter, or the width I should say, of the channel. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to start with the big heart. I'm going to select it, I'm going to come up to edit, I'm going to come to the offset icon and select it. I'm going to take the spacing as far down as it will go, 0.04, and I'm going to say inward, and I'm going to say OK. And then I'm just going to zoom in so you can see it. So now I need to make sure that this smaller heart is on top, and it appears to be. So I'm going to drag an imaginary box to select both and go edit, subtract. And that effectively punches the small heart out of the bigger one, which will give me the channel I need. If I just fill this with black so you can see what I mean, that now fills with colour, which means that that's a solid shape and it's a channel. So I'm just going to remove the fill so you can see what I'm doing. So this effectively is what you would draw through if you were using a washable pen, or you would pound your chalk over it and your chalk would go through this gap. But we have to turn it into a stencil, because if you cut it like this, it'll just create a big hole in the middle of your stencil. So I'm going to come to the path tool and select it. I'm just going to left click, hold my shift key down, draw out a line that's bigger than the height of that heart, and double click to anchor it. With it selected, I'm going to come to edit, I'm going to come back to offset, take this down to 0.4 again and say outward this time, and say OK. Because what we want is a hollow channel. This is just a slit. If that would just cut a slit through your card, we want this channel. So I'm going to get rid of that. Now I'm going to place this channel directly over the centre of the heart. You can either do it by eye or you can drag an imaginary box around both and go edit center. Just going to zoom out a little bit. Now again, as with anything, when you use the subtract function, which is effectively like a punch, the thing that you're using to subtract has to be on top. So this channel has to be on top of the heart. So I'm going to select both. In fact, I'm just going to make a duplicate of that while I remember. I'm going to select both and I'm going to go edit, subtract. And if the channel, this, is on top, it will cut through. If it disappears, it means it's on the bottom. You just need to rearrange your shapes. So that's the first part. Now, I'm going to bring this back in and I'm just going to rotate it. And I'm going to duplicate it. So I've now got two. Both of these channels are on top of this heart, and if you're unsure, select the design that you're wanting to make the breaks in my case the heart, and right click and send it to the back. Now we should be able to do two at once, so I'm going to select everything and go edit, subtract, and now that's put breaks in. And if I just go back to the basic shapes and drag out a square and send the square to the back, that's on top. Now I'm going to go edit, subtract. Now if I fill that in with colour so you can see it, I'll try and use a nice deep purple. You can see now that this would be cut out in whatever you're using to make a template, and then you've got these channels with the breaks in, and this would be where you could either draw through onto your fabric or you could rub a chalk pounce over it. So that's a stencil, that's all there is to it. If you want to make stencils for painting, you just make your channels wider. So I'm just going to go back to fit to mat. I'm going to undo this because I want to add the second heart in. So that's back to a stencil. I'm going to do the same with this one. So I'm going to select this small heart, go to edit, offset, take the spacing down all the way to 0.04. I'm going to say inward and say OK. The inward should be on top, so I'm going to select both and go edit, subtract. And that's now given me the frame I need. Then again, I'm just going to draw a path line, double click to anchor it. While it's selected, go to edit, offset. This time make an outward offset of 0.04 and say OK. And it's the channel that we want, not the single path, so I can get rid of that. So I'm going to line these up centrally. Make sure, I'm going to duplicate it and make sure that this is on top or to the front. Select both, edit, subtract. Again, I'm going to bring this one in, I'm going to rotate it. Right click and make a duplicate, rotate that and position it. And then again, select both and go edit, subtract. Now, one of them mustn't have been on top because everything's disappeared. So I'm just going to put this back and send it to the back. And if I'm unsure, I'm going to select these and say bring to front. Now let's try again. Edit, subtract. Okay, so this time now it's done it. So I would position both of those together and centre them and make them a group. And then just to add a bit more of an element to the design, you could just use the one heart, but this might look nice. And I'm going to bring this back, send it to the back so that the hearts are hopefully on front. And if they don't want to, just rearrange them yourself manually. Centre it and go edit, subtract. And that's now given us the stencil. So I'll just fill it in with black so you can see. So everything that's black here would be cut in your chosen media that you're going to use to draw through or pounce through for your stencil. So you could use card, you could use stencil, plastic, whatever. And the white bits here are the channels. So that would be where you would chalk through or draw through. And then what you could do, if you had, once you've got this, you could draw through this and then you could rotate it. I'll just create a duplicate for now. But you could make, you know, a design into a petal shape or a flower shape with them. Something like I did. I'll show you what I did on my original one. On this one, once I'd made this, I just lined them all up like this. So you could, you know, make a border out of your design. This in pink on paper was just made from this. So I literally lined it up, drew around it, and then lined it underneath and drew around it. So you could, you know, chalk through that and sew all those lines to make it like a repeating pattern. But the principles of making a stencil are the same. You've got to have these bridge gaps in them. And that's all I did when making the diamond one. So again, I took a basic shape. I went to edit, offset, made a 0.4 inward and said OK. Selected both and did edit, subtract. Then using the same principle with the path tool, I took two of these here. I welded them together. Obviously you can line them up. I'm just doing this just to show you quickly. I then went to edit, weld to weld all that together. And then I used the breaks to put the breaks in the various sections, and that's how I made this one. Put a rectangle around it and did edit, subtract. So you could do this with anything at all that you can either auto trace or that you can make your own. I did a flower. This flower template is 8.5 inches square, so obviously you would need a block or a design bigger than that to sew this pattern on. And that's why I said at the beginning you need to size your shape accordingly before you make your full stencil, because you can't shrink this down now because it will make the channels too small for you to get your pen or your chalk through. So the way I did this one, I went to the basic shapes and I chose this shape. So let's just say you're wanting to stencil onto a 6-inch block. The way I would do this, I would get a square and size it to 6 inches. So this would be your visual guide of your block. Take your shape that you want to use. Obviously that's too big for this, so shrink it down accordingly. Then with this selected, go to edit, offset, take it down as small as it will go, make it an inward, say OK. Make sure you've got both selected, do edit, subtract. and that's created your channel. Create your path, click with your left mouse, hold your shift key down so you get a perfectly straight line, double click, while it's selected, edit, take it down to 0.4 outward, say OK. Get rid of your single line path and you've now got your channel. Just going to create a duplicate for now. Position this on top, select both, edit center to line them up centrally, and then edit subtract. So that's put your breaks there, but I would put one across here as well. So take your other channel, hold your shift key down and rotate it to keep it perfectly straight. Select both, edit center, and then go edit subtract. Now the channel mustn't have been on top, so I'm just going to select it and make sure it's at the front and try it again. Edit subtract. Okay, so now you've got your shape with your channels in, so it doesn't all fall apart when you come to put it in your stencil. Right click and create a duplicate. Bring your duplicate down, space it how you want, but bearing in mind you want this design to fit within the size of your block. In this case, this is a 6-inch block. Select both of these, align them centrally, and then you can group them if you want, so right click and group. Now I would hold the Alt key down on my keyboard, and while I'm holding that I would then left click and drag a duplicate set out and let go of both the Alt key and the mouse. Then press your Alt key down again, come back to here, left click and drag another one out and let go, and then repeat. Hold the Alt key down, left click, Alt, drag another one out and let go. And that now gives you this shape, and then I put a circle in the middle. So again, grab a circle, make your circle the size that you want it to fit in the middle with it selected, edit, offset, create an outward or an inward, it doesn't really matter, of 0.04, that's the main thing. Say OK, select both, edit, subtract, make sure your middle one is on top, edit, subtract, then draw yourself a path line again, create your offset again, 0.04, get rid of your single stroke, you could put a break, I would put a break horizontally and vertically, so create a duplicate, hold your shift key down, rotate your duplicate, center them all together, and then edit, subtract, and that would go in the middle. First of all, I would select all of these, make them a group, then position this and center these together. Then make those a group, and then bring your box in, center those, and with this on top, edit, subtract, and that's your template. If I zoom in, you can see, so you draw through these spaces or pound your chalk, and then they would be what you would follow with your sewing machine. So that's how to make stencils. So I hope you found that helpful. Please give the video a thumbs up if you did. Don't forget to subscribe if you don't already do so, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.